Welcome to Moving Through and Beyond, a podcast dedicated to sharing inspired journeys of redefining life, vision, and purpose after immense hardship and grief. My goal with this podcast is to give you hope and to let my guest journeys inspire you to make the choice to keep looking up. I'm your host, Carey Conley. Hey everybody, this is Carey Conley, your host of the Moving Through and Beyond podcast. I bring on guests that I know have been doing some pretty amazing things in the world and are successful in many different areas, but they all have a story to tell of some sort of adversity that they have been through that they are now using for inspiration for others, for good, for their purpose, and so on. And I'm very honored to bring to you a friend of mine here, Catherine Anaya, who is a longtime TV journalist, anchor, host, have your own podcast. I think a couple of them, right?
Just one.
Okay.
Yes.
Which I think I've been on.
Yes, you
have.
Yes,
I have. A lot of things that you have done and creating some new stuff now, which you can talk about at the end too. So thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah.
You know why you thought maybe I had two podcasts? Because during COVID, I was doing conversations with Catherine on YouTube, and
right.
You've been on that too.
Right.
So,
and then you have the Women's Eye.
Yes, so The Women's Eye is the podcast that I
Right.
have been co-hosting because I'm one of a couple, but co-hosting for the last 7 years, and I decided in 2023 that I wasn't going to do that anymore.
Right.
To focus my energies on other new challenges
Other
and
things.
exciting opportunities.
Yeah.
So,
when you and I met through mutual friends, we didn't know a lot about our stories. And one night, I believe we were at somebody's party or something, and I learned a lot about what you've been through as well. So I wanted to kind of have you share a little bit about your journalist history and, stepping into that. You were a longtime anchor here in Arizona, right? And then made some decisions early on to make some changes. So give me a little bit of history about that.
Sure,
Yeah.
absolutely. So I started anchoring in 1990 when I was the ripe young age of 22 in South Texas. And then I moved to South Bend, Indiana for a year. And then I moved to Phoenix the first time from 92 to 98. And then I went to Los Angeles for 4 years and anchored there. And then I came back for good in 2002. My son was 1 month old. He just turned 20. So it's pretty amazing. So cumulatively, it's been about 30 years? I'm not good at math, so I can't do it that quickly, but that I've been here in Arizona. Yeah. So a lot of people think that I'm from here, but I'm not. Yeah. I'm a Southern California girl. So I have been here for a long time, since 2003, the second time, and I quote-unquote retired from news. I put it in quotes because while I'm not doing traditional news anymore, I've still been in front of the camera and out in the community and still telling stories. So I did that, stepped away in 2015, the summer of 2015. And the catalyst for that was the unexpected death of my ex-husband. But what a lot of people don't realize is that I had already started having conversations with my husband earlier that year about wanting to step away because I was really feeling like I just wasn't doing a good enough job anymore of balancing things. And balancing is very hard anyway, as you and anybody else who, has a job and is raising kids knows. But I just felt like I wasn't present enough for my family, that I needed to focus on my kids a little more, especially my son, who was 11 at the time. And then with the death of my ex-husband, really, there was just no question that the time was right where I needed to really focus on being there for especially him, because he was at such a pivotal age. When you lose a parent, and I don't know, I haven't lost a parent, thankfully, but having experienced their grief a little bit in trying to get them through it, I didn't know which way he could have gone at that very pivotal age. Yeah. So that was what played a very instrumental role in me finally just making that decision to walk away.
Which is so brave of you, Catherine, because women get so ingrained in their career, especially when you have a career like you had, very successful, very in the public eye, very loved by the people who are watching you. It's not easy to make that decision unless, unfortunately, something happens to kind of push us into that mode, right?
You know what was interesting is we have a mutual friend who was also an anchor for a very long time and actually left a couple months before I did. And what's interesting about that is that we both saw people reaching out to us, and actually people in high-level positions telling us that we inspired them to do the same thing because they had been wanting to do it and didn't feel like they could. And for me, I was most surprised by the number of men, and I'm talking about men across the country, who reached out and said, "Thank you for sharing, your decision, because I don't feel like I can talk about my desire or my want to walk away from my high profile career."
Right.
So in a odd way, we gave, and I say we because, like I said, there were a couple of us that made that decision around the same time and didn't even know the other one was making it. But I think we gave people the grace and permission to allow themselves to say, I want something different.
Yeah.
Like you were saying, we're conditioned to feeling like we have to do it all. And believe me, I love the word superwoman, but superwoman to me doesn't mean that you're necessarily juggling 100 million things, but that you're juggling things that mean something to you and matter to you and speak to your core. And while I loved what I was doing, it wasn't speaking to my heart the same way anymore.
And I get that. There have been points in my career too where there were things that I kept doing just because I knew I was helping people, and it worked for a while. But there were days that I started waking up going, okay, something's off here.
Right.
Like, this is not as easy as it used to be for me to do. It wasn't coming to me as easily anymore. And I was feeling that burnout too. But it is hard to admit about the burnout.
Yes. It is hard to admit that you're feeling a little bit of the resentment toward the very thing you worked your tail off to be able to achieve.
Right.
It's a very weird emotion to have.
Yeah.
And I want to go back just for a moment because you said it was very brave of me. I don't think it's brave at all because it was one of the easiest decisions I've ever made. Like, I never questioned whether I was doing the right thing.
Yeah.
So to me, it wasn't a brave decision. It was just the right decision for me at that time.
I understand. Well, and you were very fortunate you had the full-on support of your husband.
Yes.
Which is a blessing.
Well,
right?
and I'm glad you point to that because when I go out and I speak to women about being able to walk away, I have to give him 100% credit for supporting me, not just emotionally, but financially, to be able to say, look, walk away and you do whatever makes you happy.
Right.
Just want you to be happy.
Yeah.
And if staying home and being a full-time mom is what it is, then go for it.
Yeah.
I never did be the full-time mom because I was able to, as you know, I popped right back onto TV within 6 months, but it was an opportunity that just sort of fell in my lap, and they said, hey, come in, host a show in the morning, 8 to 10. Well, I could drop my son off at school and I could pick him up. So I wasn't missing out on any time with him.
Right.
Which was awesome.
Because being an anchor is long, hard.
Exactly.
Off family schedule hours.
Yes.
Especially the prime spots.
Right. So I had that support, like you mentioned, of my husband, and I don't think I would have been able to leave when I did without that.
Yeah. How long were you a single mom?
I was divorced for 6 years before I got remarried. And while I say, yes, I was a single mom, he was very much involved. And we were great co-parents. So I like to say I was a divorced mother, but I wasn't a single mother because he and I co-parented so well.
That's
and
so
he
great.
was so
Another
involved.
blessing.
Yes.
Because
another
this is
big blessing.
A lot of women don't have that luxury, as you know. And the financial backing, the financial support is challenging.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And my mother was one of those women. So, when he and I decided that we were going to divorce, we made sure that we were not going to repeat the same mistakes that our parents made when they were divorced. And I think we did a really good job.
Yeah. So you decided, okay, I'm done with this, moving on. I also have to tell you, I think your intuition of paying attention to being home with your kids at a really tender time was probably one of the best things you ever could have done. Because I think a lot of people don't understand how important it is to pay attention to what's going on with them at the moment it's happening, not years later.
Correct.
Yes.
It was a tough couple of years, I will
Yeah,
say that.
I'm sure.
Because, and I try to put myself in my son's shoes.
Yeah.
I remember when I told him that I was retiring, he was sitting on the stairs putting some shoes on, and he said, "Wait, what? Does that mean you're going to be at all my baseball games now?" And that was like the biggest thing to him.
Mm,
So 100% I knew in that moment I
Right.
made the right decision. But now he's entering middle school, and think about it. All of a sudden, the woman that was kind of there here and there is now
All over.
150%
All over
in
you.
my business.
Yeah. And he's going into middle school going, I think I want to distance myself.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It was a weird situation because now I'm full force involved, and he's, like you said, kind of at that age where he's like, back off a little bit.
Right.
So we had a very rough couple of years. It was a very big learning curve for both of us. But we got to a great place, and believe me, I think to myself all the time, as rough as those couple of years had been with me being so involved and you know, the pressure that put on him sometimes, if I hadn't during those years, I don't know what would have happened.
Yeah.
I shudder to think about it.
Yeah. And then again, I think this is something that's becoming a wake-up call for a lot of people. I've had 2 conversations already with podcasters today around making sure that they stay aware not only of how we're feeling and honoring that. I actually honored I interviewed my daughter today, and Catherine.
Oh, that's
Yeah,
great.
and I had her talk about from her perspective of what it looked like to lose her dad and her brother, both to suicide in her young adult years and how it affected her. And the biggest takeaway that she said today was she wanted everybody to really understand how important it was to really pay attention to your own intuition. And she is so good at it. Like she far beyond surpasses me, teaches me every day. And I think that that's really important that you felt that and acted on it when you did.
You know, I have a very similar relationship with my daughter that you have. And I have written a lot through the years since my ex-husband passed away about grief and the processing of it all for me, not just for me as his ex-wife, but also the mother of his kids and helping my kids through it. And it was just about last year, I think it was, that my daughter said, "You don't have to keep speaking for me."
Don't start crying. You know, if you go down, I go down.
I know.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
That was really important for me to hear because she doesn't process it
Yeah.
the same way I do or that I thought she did.
Right.
But we talk about it a lot.
Right.
Whereas my son doesn't. And so I have to put myself in his shoes.
Right.
You're 11 and a half years old. Like, you don't know how to process that.
Right.
So it's just,
Yeah.
I'm learning to understand that they both experience it differently.
Right.
And they both experience it differently than I do.
Yep.
Whew.
Yeah, girl. So, you know, this has been a journey, of course, for me and my daughter as well. And we've gone through a year, especially this year, when I decided to move closer to her to be near my grandchild and the next one coming soon.
Yay.
I've really watched her come into full on being her own person. And we've had to have a lot of conversations like that. Like, I got this, Mom. I know what I'm doing. We don't need to do this together all the time. And she's learned how to do it in a very loving way.
It's great, isn't it?
It's so great. And I'm looking at her going, all right. You know, and it's part of it is almost kind of sad because you think they don't need you anymore, right? But the other part is I'm so happy she's so happy and so sure of herself that she is a light that's just, I've said this probably 10 times a day, far surpasses me.
Yes,
Right?
I completely agree with you with regard to my own daughter.
Yeah.
And kudos to us because we played a part in that.
Yeah.
It's what we would have wanted,
Right?
right?
Yeah. So I always have to
back
check
then.
myself. I'm like, okay, don't wreck this.
Right. I do the same thing.
Don't mess this up.
Yes, yes.
Because, you know, I still want to be her mom, her friend, really good CC grandma. But yeah, a lot of lessons learned. And it's not been easy. And I'm sure, like me, you had a lot of hard conversations with your kids over the years, right?
More so with her. Actually, no, I had quite a few of them with my son too, during high school and even in those very tough middle school years.
Yeah.
He processes it differently, and I have
Yeah.
had to grow to understand
Yeah.
that he thinks about it, but just because he doesn't talk about it doesn't mean he's not feeling it.
Yeah.
He just feels it in different ways.
Yeah.
And I think that's the biggest lesson that I think we all should remember when it comes to grief is that we shouldn't judge people for, whether they cry or they don't cry, or they talk about it or they don't talk about it.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that they're not
Right.
internally grieving.
Yeah. Yeah. Non-judgment is a huge thing.
Yes.
In the book, my daughter and I co-authored, Keep Looking Up, we have a chapter on grace and mercy.
Mm-hmm.
And not only giving grace and mercy to other people because they don't understand what we're going through, and so they're not maybe acting the way we would have expected or wanted. It was a lot of grace and mercy for ourselves.
Yes.
A lot. And just understanding that everybody's just going through it the best they can.
Yes.
And Laurel and I process somewhat similarly, but very differently in a lot of ways. And I think that's the best thing that she and I did from the get-go is gave each other a whole lot of space with that.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I'm glad you're hitting on that, especially for parents who are listening right now.
Yes, because that conversation, while it was very eye-opening for me with my daughter, she made it a point to tell me, like, I don't grieve the same way you do.
Mm-hmm.
I don't internalize things the same way you do.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't have to keep talking for me.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Which was very, very important for me to hear.
Yeah.
She's a 26-year-old woman. She's been dealing with this since she was 18.
Yeah.
So she's had a lot of processing of her own to do, and that's her own.
Yeah.
And I need to give her that grace.
Yeah.
And that ability to internalize it the way she wants to.
Yeah. Such a blessing.
Yes.
So when you were going through all this transition and the hard years, Catherine, what were some of the things that helped you get through it?
Well, definitely writing. Writing is the reason why I became a journalist to begin with. So writing is very, very important to me. It's very cathartic, and I guess I've always known that I was a writer because it's like I can't not write.
Mm-hmm.
So I had a magazine column at the time, and then, of course, Instagram. I don't post a whole lot because I feel like I go in these waves where I post because I have to get things off my chest, and then other times I think, well, I don't need to be that
every day
transparent every single day about what's going on with me. So maybe it's just a fun post. But anyhow, my point being that I use Instagram sometimes to share those things that I need to get out on paper. But what I've started doing since last year is writing my memoirs because I want that to be a gift that I give my kids so that they understand me from the very beginning, not just from when they got to know me,
right,
but from before they knew me, because I think it's going to help them understand my decisions, who I am, why I react the way I do to certain things. I mean, I had a conversation with my son before I got here, and this is why I don't tell you things, because you react this way. And it's like, you need to let me learn my lessons on my own. Well, no. I would love to be able to share those lessons with you before you make the mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
And then if you choose to make them after that, that's on you.
Right.
But I understand where he's coming from.
Yeah.
So and I think if only he knew why I react that way, maybe he would understand me a little better.
Yes.
So it's really important for me to write this book.
Yeah.
And so I haven't been as forthcoming on social media because I feel like I want to save it for the book.
Yeah. I love that. So writing helped you.
So the writing has been very big for me. And speaking about it to other people. I mean, I think you and I went and had a shake one day. We were just going to have a protein shake, and we ended up walking out, 2 hours later?
Crying half the
crying and
time.
hugging. And yes, because when you talk to other people, you realize that you're not alone in a lot of these emotions and experiences. It validates our feelings a lot of time. We just recognize that we have so much more in common than we think.
Right.
But because we're not conditioned to talking about these very personal things.
Yep.
And I think if we're going to be our true authentic selves, there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah. And I don't know about you, but I'm seeing a whole lot more of that happening right now.
Yes.
Like a whole lot more people coming forward and talking about how people don't know what's been going on in their life and how tough it's been, really tough. And I love that because it gives me the freedom to be more like that, which helps me impact the people that I want to help.
Yes.
And it also helps me heal. And I hope it helps other people heal.
I feel that way too.
Yeah.
I mean, it's very healing for me to talk about it.
Yeah.
And the feedback that you get when you do talk about your personal experiences, doesn't that make you feel like, wow, there was a purpose for me wanting to share that?
Right. Like,
because even if you impact just one person, like maybe that was the reason you had to experience that hardship. Or, I always look for the reason behind things. Sometimes it's not so obvious, but I know it'll appear at some point.
Always does.
Yes.
Like pieces to a puzzle, they all fall into place. Obviously losing my husband and my son, no idea, like, why is this happening?
And
not once, but twice.
I'm sure you've asked yourself that a million times over the years.
Why us?
Yes.
When you can look around, especially at the holidays, when you can look around, you see all these families just having all these magical moments, right? But the reason I launched this podcast 6 months ago was because I knew that it was time for me to have that bigger audience and that bigger voice and start talking more about it and bringing people on like you that on the forefront all looks like they got this going on. Super successful, beautiful,
Absolutely.
You don't know what's really – we all have a story.
It's so true, and that's one of the things I love most about my job is that I do believe everybody has a story, and I love to be able to tell those stories and share those stories in the various ways that I do.
Yep.
I think when you touched on the fact that people are more transparent and authentic these days, I think COVID taught us a lot about just how much little things really matter in life. Experiences are huge for me. Huge for me. I'd rather experience something than have all the gifts and the things and the tchotchkes and whatever in life.
Agreed.
Because I have been at the end of someone's life with them before, and they're talking about relationships and things that they've done with people. Not what was your job? How much money did you make? How many handbags did you have?
Yeah.
Yes. That's not – I think COVID taught us that, what's truly important in life. And also how important having loved ones around is. Now, granted, I know there are a lot of people who are listening or watching that are thinking, oh, I was about ready to strangle so-and-so after, a full year of being in lockdown.
I heard a lot of that.
Right. But I think it also – for me anyway, and for a lot of the people I know, it just gave us this time to watch TV together, do jigsaw puzzles together, just talk. That was a gift when you think about how busy everybody is in life. And it taught us to slow down a little bit and appreciate each other.
Yeah. Well, I know two things that that really light you up. One of them, you just mentioned you love telling stories, which is why you went into journalism. And the other thing that I want to talk just a few minutes before we end this is your heart for philanthropy and community.
Yes.
So big.
Well, I'm a very grateful person. I really am. I think about that a lot because I see how grateful my daughter is.
Yeah.
And when I say that, it's like, she maintains relationships with people through the years that have helped her.
Yeah.
And I look at that and I think, did I teach you that? Because I don't remember teaching you that, but clearly she picked up on it from me. I have relationships that go back so many years because they did something for me, and I have never forgotten it.
Right.
So going back to what was the original question? Now I've lost my train of
two
thought.
things. One, you love telling people stories.
Yes.
And two, your heart for philanthropy in the community.
Yes. So because of my gratitude and never forgetting where I came from, it's really important for me to be involved in the community and, share those stories for people who don't have a voice, but also to use my platform to help make this community bigger and better. And I've done that since my very first job. I was a member of the Westlake JCs in South Texas, and I was only there a year. But I have just felt like that is a very important part of not only who I am, but what I do.
Right.
As far as being a storyteller. I mean, you can't tell people stories if you don't know people.
Yeah.
So it's been wonderful being able to really use my platform to support, to give back, to encourage, to inspire, to give a voice to some of the, smaller organizations, philanthropies, charitable organizations, people,
Yeah.
to just lend a helping hand, so to speak. And that's probably the best part of my job. But I'm also at a point now where I'm learning the power of boundaries and saying no.
Yeah.
And that has been a learning curve for me as well. But I'm really enjoying a quote that I saw recently that I've sort of weaved into my 2023 goals is it said, say no to anything that doesn't make you react when you get the invitation, whatever it is. Hell yeah.
Yeah.
If it's not a hell yeah for you,
Yep.
say nah.
Yeah. Yes. I have that mantra as well. As a matter of fact, my mantra last year, and it's still on my whiteboard in my office, is do more of what I love, less of what I tolerate, and none of what I despise.
I love that.
Yeah. It's taken me a while to really adopt that because I've been so used to saying yes and tolerating a lot of stuff, not realizing I was still doing it because you just get ingrained in it until you have other people point it out to you like, you really feel like doing that anymore? Because I'm not feeling like that's what you're supposed to be doing anymore. You know what? You're right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And not feeling bad about it.
Right.
Not feeling like you have to over-explain because
Right.
I've done that a lot.
Yeah.
Or I'm sorry, but you don't have to be sorry
Yeah.
because there's
No is a
something else you
sentence.
want to do. Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes, I love
heard that
I
too.
need to
No is
remember
a
that.
sentence.
No
Yeah.
is a sentence.
Yeah.
No, thank you. I prefer that
Yeah.
better.
Yeah. Thank you for asking.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, you are so gracious, Catherine, and I'm just so grateful. We haven't been friends for a long time,
I feel like we have.
but I feel like we have too. It's been rich.
It has been rich.
It's been
and
very rich.
That, I think, more than anything, I have come to appreciate as I get older
Yeah.
is that quality doesn't always have to mean quantity.
Yeah.
And I love those friendships where you don't have to talk for months
Right.
and you get together
Like
and
we don't.
you pick up where you
Yeah.
left off.
Yes. Any last parting pieces of advice you want to leave with anybody who's moving through any kind of adversity? And it doesn't need to necessarily be mine or yours. They're just going through a really tough time. What would you suggest?
Well, I've had plenty of tough times, really tough times. And I think the one thing that I've held on to is that there's always light at the end of the tunnel. And while it may feel like the worst thing in the world right now, and I don't want to take away from any of that because I have been rock bottom. But I remember the thing that really sort of kept me going was I kept thinking, there's just another purpose for me, and this isn't it. And you can mourn whatever it is that you've lost, a job, a home, whatever. Mourn it.
Right.
Be in it. Feel it. But remind yourself that have faith and remind yourself that there's probably something better on the other side for you. You just have to believe.
Yeah.
And I think that's the biggest thing that's carried me through my biggest obstacles is just believing there's got to be something better. And there usually is.
Yeah.
I mean, I can't tell you when it's gotten worse from that one instance, but it always gets better.
Yeah. That's just the patience and the faith.
Yes.
It's just, I think, comes down to having faith.
Absolutely.
You have to have
so
something
important.
anchored beyond yourself that you just surrender to and say, you know what, I don't know what's happening.
I don't know what's
But-
happening. I don't know why, but there's got to be something
Yep.
positive to come out of that.
Yep.
And I think that if I'm putting it into perspective when it comes to the loss of my ex-husband, it forced me to reevaluate my life and what's important to me.
Right.
And that's what I had to hold on to
Yeah.
find some meaning in the
It's
loss.
a gift. Yeah.
Yes.
I appreciate you so much being here.
Thank you.
I really enjoy you.
Thank
I
you.
hope we get to spend more time together.
I tried not to cry.
Yeah. Thank you.
It just doesn't
I knew I
happen.
saw you and I'm like, we're not doing that again.
I think that happens just when the two of us
I
get,
know, I
together,
think so,
get
too.
together. It's
Well.
just, it's a given.
I appreciate you so much.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So thank you, everybody, for listening to this episode of Moving Through and Beyond. I'm your host, Carey Conley, to remind you to keep looking up. If you found this episode inspiring or helpful, please share it with a friend or a family member. In order to be successful on this mission, I can't do it alone. Connect with me at www.careyconley.com, and don't forget to sign up for my weekly Do It On Purpose newsletter. Let's build this life-giving vision movement together to end this epidemic, save lives, and create purpose.